like ours are, but out of cartilage. And to see the difference here, if everyone could hold their arm out, pick a point about halfway in between their wrist and their elbow, and try to bend it. But don't try too hard. You should note that your arm does not bend there because that's bone. It's tough, it's hard, it's rigid. Now wrinkle your nose, wrinkle your ear. That's cartilage. That's what sharks' entire skeletons are made out of. It makes them much more flexible. They're able to turn. It heals faster. It's more buoyant, so there's a lot of advantages to that. Sharks, skates, rays, and chimeras all have cartilaginous skeletons, which is different from the other major group of fishes that have bones much like ours. Sharks also don't have a swim bladder, which is an organ that some bony fish have that let them float in the water, which means sharks basically need to keep swimming in order to stay buoyant. They use lift that comes off their fins, much like an airplane works, in order to stay buoyant in the water. There are currently, oh, hold on, I'm skipping ahead here. Sharks have the same 5 senses that humans do. They can see, they can hear, they can smell, they can taste, they can touch. And each of these work as well as ours or better, but in some cases better adapted for the ocean environment. Sharks can see better than we can in low light or in regular light. They can see better than we can in clear water or in murky water. There's some evidence that some species of sharks can see colors that we cannot see. So they can see a little bit into the ultraviolet range. And some coral reef fish actually have markings in the ultraviolet range that humans can never see with our naked eye. Sharks' sense of smell is legendary. You may have heard a quarter of a shark's brain is devoted to the sense of smell. That's true for some species. You may have heard that a shark can smell a drop of blood a mile away. No, they cannot. That is not how smell works. If you're ever smelling anything, it is because particles of that something are actually physically reaching your nose and the chemoreceptors on your nose. So remember that next time you're smelling something gross. But no, they cannot smell they cannot smell a drop of blood that's a mile away. The blood needs to, particles from that blood need to physically encounter their nose. They actually have fairly good hearing, as well as taste and touch, about comparable to ours. But sharks also have extra senses that we don't have. They have the ability to detect vibrations in the water column through an organ called a lateral line. A lot of bony fish have that too, and it's sensitive enough that they can tell the difference between a healthy fish swimming along strongly and a weak fish kind of struggling. It's also sensitive enough to tell the difference between a big fish and a small fish swimming, or one fish or a bunch of fish swimming. And they also have an electroreceptive organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini. It means they can sense the electric fields given off by all living things, by the beating heart or by electrical energy in the nervous system. So if a prey of a shark species is buried under the sand, where it can't be smelled, it can't be seen, it can't be heard, the sharks still know it's there because they can sense its beating heart. Some other animals have electroreception too, such as the duck-billed platypus. The duck-billed platypus bill is actually an electroreceptive organ. And people ask me all the time, how smart are sharks? Well, it depends on how you measure intelligence, and scientists have a variety of ways for doing that. There's a question about slides. There are not slides for this. The sharks are never going to compose a symphony or write a great play or anything. But they are smarter than most people think they are. They're very intelligent for fish. If you draw a line around, if you plot animals' body size versus animals' brain size, what you get is an average line. Sharks are above that line, which means that the brain of a shark is larger than you would expect it to be simply based on the shark's size alone. Sharks also have some fairly unexpected behavior if you consider them only a mindless killing machine. A very few species do have some degree of parental care, though most do not. They do have some fairly complex social hierarchies, and they also have something called social learning, which means a shark can learn a behavior simply from watching another shark do that behavior. That's a very complex behavior in the animal kingdom that many animals cannot do. there are currently, as of the most recent formal list that came out earlier this week, there are 509 species of sharks and about 1,300 total species of sharks, skates, rays, and chimeras. So a lot of people have heard of the great white shark or the bull shark or the tiger shark or great hammerhead shark, but there are 509 species, with more discovered all the time. A friend of mine did a research expedition in the Indian Ocean on a deep sea trawling vessel. He just volunteered. To go work as a crewman on this deep sea fishing vessel leaving out of Madagascar, and he spent a month on it. And in that month, he discovered 9 new species of sharks that no one had ever seen, because there are no scientific research vessels in that ocean. So he partnered with fishermen. There are sharks found that live in coral reefs. There are some that live under the Arctic ice, the Greenland shark. There are many that live in the deep sea, deeper than humans can go without the aid of submersibles. There are some sharks that live only in fresh water. Basically, the U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmers have a saying that if you want to test if there are sharks in the water around you, dip your finger in the water and taste it. If it's salty, there's probably sharks around you, because they're really just about everywhere. And that's not even true, because again, there are some freshwater species of sharks. When most people think about sharks, and this has been in the news a lot in the last couple of weeks, they think about sharks biting people. That's really an unusual thing. Any human injury or any human death is a tragedy, but this is a really unlikely event. Things like Jaws and some specials on Shark Week give you the impression that if you dip your toe in a bathtub, a shark is going to jump out of the drain and eat your whole family. And that's really just not the case. There were, last year, which was the most ever, there were 98 people bitten by sharks, of which fewer than 10 died, and another fewer than 10 had very serious injuries. In comparison, in a typical year, there are about 700,000 Americans die from heart attacks. About 550,000 Americans die from cancer. About 50,000 Americans die in car accidents. And 2 Americans died being bitten by sharks last year. So it's just not something that you need to worry about, but it represents a disproportionate level of media coverage compared to other issues related to sharks. If someone dies of a heart attack, it's not news. If 700,000 people die of heart attacks, it's not news. If one person's bitten by a shark, it's international news. More people are bitten by other people on the New York City subway every year than are bitten by sharks in the whole world.
And David, I'm just going to interrupt you just
for a second.
Sorry, we have a lot of questions coming in. I just want to let everyone know that we will probably answer a lot of these at the end. But there is one about shark bites in particular, asking if sharks would not bite a person, or would a shark not bite a person if they weren't provoked, basically. So you can just kind of speak to that a little bit.
We don't really know why sharks bite people, and anyone who says they know exactly why any animal does anything is not correct. But we believe that humans are not really on the menu for sharks, because I told you how good sharks' sense of smell is and how shark senses are, and I told you that sharks are basically everywhere there's ocean. Humans are in the ocean near sharks a lot. If you've ever been in the ocean, you've been near a shark, and you probably didn't know it, and there's fewer than 100 bites a year out of hundreds of millions of people that go in the water. So we're pretty sure that humans are not on the menu. And one leading theory is that when sharks bite people, it's a case of mistaken identity. Though a lot of times when sharks bite people, it's when a human grabs a shark, often trying to get it to turn around so they can take a better picture. This is not a thing that you should do. Sharks generally will not bother you if you are not bothering them. Grabbing them by the fin to try to get a better picture is bothering them. But yeah, this is just not something that you need to worry about. While you don't need to worry about sharks, you should respect the ecological role that sharks play in the oceanic environment. Predators are always very important animals. They weed out the sick, the weak, and the dying. They provide what's called top-down control, or natural selection pressure. You've heard of survival of the fittest. Predators are part of the reason why things that are not fit do not survive. So they're very important. And apex predators at the top of the food chain, are particularly important animals. Many species of sharks are the apex predators of their environment, which means losing them can have a disproportionate impact on the ecosystem. Even though there aren't that many sharks there to begin with, if you lose them, their strong ecological effects are lost, and that can be a problem. Sharks also support the health of whole ecosystems. Again, they can keep a whole ecosystem in balance by keeping prey populations in check, and other things. They maintain healthy populations of commercially important fish species by, again, eating those sick, the weak, and the dying, and keeping populations from getting out of control. And there is also a great deal of tourism associated with sharks. Crazy people like me like to go scuba diving with sharks on our vacation and not just go sit on the beach. And in some cases, a shark can be more valuable alive than dead because of this, because people will pay lots of money to go to places where there are healthy shark populations and swim with them. Sharks are actually in a great deal of trouble. 1 out of every 4 species of sharks and their relatives is listed as threatened with extinction by the IUCN Red List. Amphibians have a higher percentage of species that are listed as threatened with extinction, but that's it. So sharks are one of the most threatened groups of animals in the world. This is largely due to overfishing. Overfishing means when you take too many fish out of a population, when fishermen kill more fish than can naturally be replaced by the fish reproducing. There are a lot of demand for shark products, both for shark fin soup. Some of you may have heard of. This is a major environmental issue. It's a traditional Chinese medicine product that's made from the cartilaginous skeletal features in the fins of a shark. This has led to a process called shark finning, which is when a shark is brought on board a fishing vessel, the fins are cut off, and the rest of the shark is dumped overboard where it will bleed to death or drown over the course of about an hour. This is not a good thing, but it is also illegal in large parts of the world, including in U.S. waters. There is also a great deal of demand for shark meat. Where I am in South Florida, you can buy blacktip shark steaks at the Publix, at the grocery store seafood counter. And it's also a hugely popular dish in parts of Europe, in Brazil, in Argentina. So there's a lot of demand for these shark products. According to some estimates, we've seen 90% or more of shark populations decline in areas where they were formerly abundant. That's since the 1970s. So for some of you high school students and middle school students listening, the 1970s might sound like forever ago, but it was well within your parents' lifetimes. And these are animals that were swimming in the ocean 200 million years before there were dinosaurs on land, and in your parents' lifetime, we've killed 90% of some of them. Part of the reason for why they're so vulnerable is because they don't reproduce as quickly as bony fish. An adult female lionfish can lay 1 million eggs in a year. An adult female mahi-mahi can have hundreds of thousands of eggs and can spawn several times a year. A sandbar shark, which is one of my favorite species, takes 15 years to reach reproductive maturity, at which point they can have 6, 8, 10 babies every 2 or 3 years. So they're just not even the same ballpark as how frequently other species can reproduce. So that means they're extra susceptible to overfishing. So to combat this, our lab, the Shark Research and Conservation Program at the University of Miami, takes a 3-pronged approach. Part of it is public education and outreach, things like what we're doing today, talking with you guys, and talking with other students throughout Florida, throughout the country, throughout the world, either in person or virtually. Because we believe that this is happening not because no one knows about it, or not because no one cares about it, but because no one even knows that it's happening. We found that when people learn that it's happening, they start to care. I should note, for those of you in high school science classes, on every shark research trip we take out of Miami, we bring a high school science class with us, and the high school students help with every step of the process, with fishing for the sharks, with taking measurements from the sharks, with tagging the sharks, with taking samples from the sharks. We take over 1,000 high school students a year with us. So if you're interested in learning more about that, check out sharktagging.com, our lab website, or you can ask me about it later. But hopefully we'd love to see some of you guys come out with us later. We also do a great deal of cutting-edge scientific research. Our lab averages about 1.5 peer-reviewed scientific research papers a month, which means we're a very productive research lab. And we're focusing on we do a lot of research with GPS satellite tags on the sharks. Every time the shark's fin breaks the surface, the computer chip in the tag broadcasts its GPS location to orbiting satellites that email it to us. So you can actually track all of our satellite tag sharks on Google Earth. And some of them go really far. We had one shark that was doing laps around the whole Gulf of Mexico. We've had sharks tagged in Florida that go to Canada. We've had sharks tagged in Florida that go to Morocco. We've had lots of sharks that go down to South America. So they cruise around really far, and this is really important to understanding what they do and how to protect them. We can't protect a shark if we don't know where to protect it, and our lab is helping to figure out where they go, when they go there, what they do when they're there. My research focuses a lot on diet of these shark species. What are they eating? Does that change in different habitats? Does that change throughout their range? Things like that. That's also very important to knowing how to protect them. If you want to protect an animal, you don't just protect it from one threat. You have to make sure that its food is there and the things that eat it are not growing out of control. We also have an active research project looking at recreational shark fishing. That means not commercial shark fishing, not when people are catching a shark to sell it, but recreational means doing it for fun. If you've ever gone out fishing with your parents or with your relatives just to go fishing for the day, maybe you catch one thing and bring it home and eat it, that's recreational fishing, and that's a growing threat to sharks. We also have a huge variety of other ongoing research projects. Our lab has 26 undergraduate and master's level interns, many of them running their own projects. So it's a really big lab, and we do a lot. All of our research papers are open access, which means anyone can read them, even if you don't have a university library subscription. That's all accessible at sharktagging.com. And this research is frequently covered in the media. This research is frequently presented at scientific research conferences. It's influenced shark conservation policy at the Florida level, at the U.S. Atlantic coast level, and also a little bit in the Bahamas. So we also do a little bit of activism and advocacy. We try to make sure that the right people know what's going on and what they can do about it. We work with some professional environmental nonprofit groups, providing them with our research expertise and things like that. We also occasionally speak directly to policymakers and to make sure that they know the most correct science that's out there. So a question I get a lot, and hopefully if I've done my job, some of you will be having this question, is what can I do to help? Hopefully I've convinced you that sharks are not something you need to be afraid of. You should recognize that they're actually very important to a healthy functioning ecosystem, and without them there can be ecological problems that can affect humans. And you should recognize that they are in trouble due to largely to overfishing. So hopefully the question that you're having now is, what can I do? And there's a few things you can do. The most important thing you're doing right now, you're learning about it. And hopefully you'll tell your friends, you'll tell your siblings, you'll tell your parents, you'll tell your relatives, hey, I learned something today about our planet that's in trouble that I didn't know before. And hopefully you are already not consuming things like shark fin soup or shark steak or things like that. But I would encourage you, if you are, to not do that, unless you are sure it comes from a not overfished species. And there are sources of shark meat you can get that are not overfished. But it's hard, particularly for my grocery store chain, Publix, it's very hard to tell where the fish came from. Eating sustainable seafood in general is a great thing you can do to help the ocean, and not eating unsustainable seafood. There's a group called Seafood Watch, run out of the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. They have an app you can download for your smartphone, or you can just request a free card that fits in your wallet. and it tells you what species of fish are good to eat from an environmental perspective, what species of fish are perhaps something you should not eat from an environmental perspective. It's a very easy to use, very straightforward project that makes it easy for you to make a difference through your purchasing power. You can also contact your elected officials and express your support for sharks and shark conservation. Every time we've had a middle school science class or a high school science class write to their governor or write to their senator or write to their congressperson, they get a response. They don't necessarily, the response is not necessarily, yes, we're going to change our longstanding opinion and do what you said, but they pay attention. Elected officials care what their constituents think, and if you tell them you're talking to your parents who are voters, or some of you, or if you're high school seniors, maybe old enough to vote yourselves, they will pay attention. So that's a big way that you can help. And also, every once in a while there's a worthwhile petition that comes up, or there's a new quota that's proposed, or a new regulation that's proposed, that the U.S. federal government is actively asking citizens to comment. If you follow me and follow our lab on social media, you will get heads up about when those are. And then you can respond to that by actually commenting in a way that's productive and helpful to shark conservation. So there are a lot of ways you can help. I should also note that there are a lot of people out there saying, do this, it'll help, when it doesn't help and may even hurt. There are a lot of environmental extremist groups out there. There are a lot of groups that are trying to take your money when they don't actually do anything. This is a problem. It not only does it take resources away from the actual conservation movement, but it makes you think that you've done something to help when really you have not. So I strongly encourage you not to interact with these environmental extremist groups. They have never accomplished anything from an environmental perspective, and they make things worse. But there are a lot of great organizations out there that are doing a good job and do need your help. Even if you're able to donate a few dollars, that'll always be appreciated. If you're able to donate your time, or even help spread their message on social media just by clicking share or retweet, that can often make a big difference. So at this point, I will stop here and use the rest of the time to answer questions. I think Allie is going to curate some of those questions and read them to me. But if you have a question, just type it in the box and Allie will.
Okay. Oh, very nice. So that way it's happy and healthy while it's out of the water there. First and foremost, we have a couple questions about the shark in the main picture here.
Shark in the Everglades.
And that was the picture we used on the website.
Yeah, that's a large lemon shark in the Everglades. The pump that's in its mouth helps it to breathe while it's out of the water. It pumps water over its gills from the inside.
Okay. Oh, very nice. So that way it's happy and healthy while it's out of the water there.
Designed to minimize stress to the animals as much as possible to get the data we need to protect them.
Great. And actually one that just came in, but this is a really good segue, is what kind of things are you learning about the sharks as you're tagging them? What are you looking for in your research specifically?
My research specifically doesn't use the tags too much, but our labs does. And these tags are amazing tools. They can do all kinds of cool stuff, but the main thing is just, where do the sharks go? Not only does it record GPS location that lets us track whether the sharks, for example, we just had a paper that came out that was one of our master students' work, that we found great hammerhead sharks. It's illegal for fishermen to kill them in Florida state waters, but it's not illegal for fishermen to kill them just outside of Florida state waters. And we found that they spend a lot of their time just outside Florida state waters, which means that the protections that are in place are not as helpful as they otherwise could be. So by knowing where the animals go, something as basic as that, it can really help protect them. But these tags also record how deep the animals go, what times of day do they do certain things. Do they have a thing called an accelerometer in them? That's actually the same tool that's in the Nintendo Wii controller, that you move your wrist around and it registers three-dimensional acceleration and makes your Wii avatar move. That same technology is in these shark tags, so we can tell when they accelerate, when they turn, when they go up or down, just from that. And that can tell us some fairly fine-scale information about the shark's behavior. We can also track.
Great, and then no, I was going to say another question that's come up that's sort of related to this is shark migration. So obviously, as you're tracking movement and where sharks are spending time, do different species of sharks migrate? What do their migratory patterns look like? That sort of thing.
Absolutely, they migrate. Again, we've seen some species that move thousands and thousands of miles. Something that's called a measurement called the activity space, which is 80% of an animal's time is spent within a particular region. It every once in a while will dart out of that for a little foraging trip or a little trip. But the activity space of tiger sharks in the Atlantic Ocean is the size of 1,000,000,000 with a B football fields. So they really move a lot. They go huge distances and they repeat the same patterns every year. The longest migration on record is a great white shark that swam from South Africa to Australia. Some of you may have a world map in your classroom, that's really far.
Yeah, definitely. And we also got a lot of questions in just about sharks and one question like their anatomy. And so some students wanted to know, do sharks have similar organs to humans? Are there any that excuse me, differ greatly from humans to sharks?
Sharks do have all the same major organs that we have. They're sometimes different sizes or different orientations. A shark's brain looks totally different from ours, but all of the same regions are there. They're just arranged differently. Sharks' livers are huge, huge. The animal in the picture that you have on your screen of me with the lemon shark, that's about an 8.5-foot lemon shark. Its liver is probably 5.5 feet long. And the reason why they have that is because oily livers help with buoyancy, because they don't have that swim bladder that most species of fish do. So having a liver filled with oil that's lighter than water helps them stay afloat in the water.
And as far as their teeth, we know that their teeth are a little bit different than ours. How many rows of teeth or how many teeth does the average shark have, and are they losing them more regularly than we are as humans?
It varies pretty widely. Again, there are over 500 species of sharks that are out there. So next time you see an article on the internet that says there are 300 species of sharks, that's not correct. There are over 500. And they have just a huge range in what they eat, what their mouths look like, things like that. But there are some species of sharks that can go through thousands of teeth in a lifetime, and they have sort of a conveyor belt of almost ready teeth that when some fall out, the new ones just sort of slide into position. And the reason for that is some sharks eat very hard prey. Tiger sharks eat sea turtles, shell and all. Some nurse sharks eat lobsters and conch shells. So they go through teeth pretty quickly, and also they can't brush their teeth, and they can't go see a dentist if a tooth is damaged. So the teeth fall out, and then new ones come into position. Some species of sharks can go through thousands of teeth in their lifetime.
Wow. And we had quite a few questions come in about hammerhead sharks specifically. I think those might be a favorite among some people. And so people were curious that the hammer part of their head, is that flexible? And what's the use for? Is there a biological use that we know of?
It is very rigid, actually. It is very rigid, actually, more so than the rest of their body. So much so that that's the part that we grab onto when we're trying to secure a hammerhead, because it's very rigid. There are a few reasons for it. One is its extra surface area for the electrosensory organ, so the hammerhead can sweep its head over the bottom like someone with a metal detector at the beach. And also, when it finds something buried under the sand, often something like a stingray, it can pin it really easily, and while it's pinned, take bites out with it.
Awesome. We also had a question about great white sharks. About the average size of great white sharks. I know these are ones we hear about a lot, so people were wondering how large they get.
The largest great white shark that has ever been reliably measured was a little more than 20 feet long, which is huge. huge. But there are people that say there are 30-foot long great whites out of there.
And
I don't think so.
let's sort of contrast that is, someone asked the size of an average shark, but we know that sharks vary so much because there's so many different species. So what's the smallest species of shark out there, and how large is that we know of?
The commonly cited smallest shark ever, but there are several very close in size to that, would be the dwarf lantern shark. It's less than a foot long when it's full grown. Also, like all lantern sharks, it glows in the dark. They live in the deep sea, and they use the light to either signal each other or to attract prey that go over and say, hey, what's that? Oh, it's something trying to eat you. Let's do that. And the largest shark in the world, which is also the largest fish in the world, is the whale shark, which can be over 40 feet long when full grown. So there's a pretty huge range. Sharks also come in a huge variety of shapes and sizes and colors. There's lots of brownish sharks, lots of grayish sharks. The great white has a white belly. Leopard sharks have spots. Tiger sharks have stripes. There's also a shark that's bubblegum pink in color, and that's the goblin shark. They live in the deep sea. Red is if any of you are scuba divers, you know that light changes as you go deeper, and red is the first color, the first wavelength of light to completely disappear. So things that are red in color appear invisible under a certain depth, and goblin sharks are pink.
And then we also had questions about, are there sharks that can live in both saltwater and freshwater? You mentioned that there are some freshwater type sharks, or are those really specific sharks that can survive in a freshwater environment?
There are dozens of species of sharks and rays that can spend some or all of their time in freshwater and saltwater, or at the very least brackish water, which is what we call the intermediate area. Like a bay or a harbor would often be brackish water because it's having rivers flow into it, and it's having, but it flows into the ocean. So the salinity changes with tides. There are dozens of species. The most famous one is the bull shark, but there are a lot that can do that. And there's something called the glyphis shark that lives almost entirely in freshwater. They're found throughout the Indo-Pacific, often in Papua New Guinea, northern Australia.
And then someone else asked about sort of shark social behaviors and hierarchy. Like, is there a hierarchy of sharks? Do they travel mostly solo? That sort of thing.
Again, it varies hugely by species. There are some species that school, not very many, but some, and they do have fairly complex social behavior when they do that. Scalloped hammerhead sharks are famous for schooling in a place in the Galapagos, and you look at that and see if a threat emerges, the smaller sharks go to the middle of the school, and the larger sharks go to the outside to try and keep the threat away from the more vulnerable members of the school. There are also fairly complex social hierarchies in some species. Baby lemon sharks in nursery areas in the Bahamas have been known to, even though there might be hundreds of babies in this same nursery area, they preferentially spend some of their time with certain individuals and preferentially avoid certain individuals. Like if you go to the cafeteria in your school at lunchtime, there's someone you definitely want to sit with at lunch, and there's someone you definitely don't want to sit with. Sharks do that exact same thing. Very interesting.
I think sharks are a lot more like humans than a lot of people realize. It, there's a lot of universals across the animal kingdom, and so that's very interesting. Someone also wanted to know, are sharks influenced by magnets?
To some extent, yes, because that same organ that can sense the electric fields also senses magnetic fields. Electric fields and magnetic fields are very similar. And we believe that sharks use the magnetic field of the Earth to do these long-distance migrations. Because when you're out in the middle of the ocean, there's no landmark. There's no street signs. It just looks like ocean in every direction. So we believe they use the magnetic field to navigate. There's some effort to use powerful magnets to keep sharks away from beaches. But the problem with that is powerful magnets don't last very long in salt water. Like days, they dissolve. So there may be some in captivity in tests. If you put a magnet next to a shark's nose, the shark freaks out. How much that can be used in the wild?
Yes, I have seen some of those studies, so that is very interesting. Maybe a future area of science there. And then we have a couple questions about maybe some myths about sharks. I'm not sure. The first asks, is it true that if you turn a shark over, will it go to sleep? And I think I would advise against not attempting to turn a shark over, first of all.
Yes. You should not do that. Yes, you should not do that, but yes, that's called tonic immobility. Sharks basically pass out if they're flipped over, and it's not a pleasant process for them. If you've ever, if you know any people or have ever seen on the news or a TV show a human who's in a car accident or is badly injured, they'll talk about an out-of-body experience. They could see and hear everything around them, but they couldn't move. That's tonic immobility.
Oh.
That's what happens with the sharks.
So not a nice,
chickens
not a nice sleep at all. Very stressful
when they're
experience.
super stressed. So this is not a nice thing to do, and it's more like a passing out of terror and stress experience. And some researchers do this. Some aquariums do this. Those are for very good reasons because they need to do an operation quickly for the health of the animal. There are scuba divers that just do this for fun.
I would do this. I would always recommend not touching animals if you're out scuba diving, sort of leaving them be and just observing nature. Exactly. And then we had more than one question about Megalodon. So I know you've been a little vocal about Megalodon in the past. So if you want to address some of those questions.
Yes. Some of you may have seen a Shark Week documentary and then a follow-up documentary that claimed that Carcharodon megalodon, the largest predatory shark that ever lived, is not extinct and is still alive. This is a complete and total lie. There is no doubt about this whatsoever. The Megalodon was a real animal. It has been extinct for at least 2.5 million years. That's longer than there have been humans. There's absolutely no doubt about that at all among actual experts. Shark Week lied to you for ratings. That's why the people that appear in that episode are actors, not actual scientists, not actual government officials, not actual relatives of victims of shark bites. They are actors. There is a disclaimer at the end of the video that says this. No one watches through the end of the credits. Shark Week knows that. That's why they put the disclaimer at the end. There is no doubt at all. This is not a controversy. This is not an area of debate. Megalodon is extinct and has been for
I know it's a question aquariums get a lot as well, but there is a very serious consensus within the scientific community about that one.
100% consensus.
And then just a couple more questions. What are some of the biggest challenges that you think sharks face and that they have to overcome conservation-wise within their lifetime, that sort of thing?
Well, a big problem is by far the biggest threat facing sharks is overfishing. And that there are some people that say that you need to the only way to solve overfishing is ban all fishing for sharks. I don't agree with that, but certainly a lot of fisheries in the world today are not run sustainably, and that needs to be changed. Another big problem is misinformation. People believe that sharks are mindless killing machines that are a threat to them and their families, and then when they hear sharks are threatened, their reaction is, good, what can we do to make them more threatened? So getting people to understand the truth is also really important, and that's
awesome.
A big part of
Thanks.
why
and then we have a lot of questions that are coming in sort of about you and your research specifically. So when you're handling sharks, this is the first one, what sort of equipment are you using to handle sharks to make sure that both you're safe and the shark is safe?
The main piece is the water pump that you can see in the photo on the screen share thing. Other than that, it's strength of interns. We usually have 2 or 3 or 4 of our volunteers restraining the shark so it cannot move. And the most important thing that we've found from a shark stress and safety standpoint is not be gentle with them, but get it over with quickly. So we need to get them back. We need to finish the research work up and get them back in the water as quickly as possible, even if that means handling them a little more roughly than we might otherwise think to. But being gentle and taking longer is worse
right,
for them.
Right, because once they get back in the water, they're much calmer and they're able to sort of bounce back a little bit. And then the other question is, what is your research specifically on? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. My research is focusing on what's called the ecosystem role that sharks play, and also what different groups of people think the ecosystem role that sharks play is. And the ecosystem role means, what do sharks do for an environment? And if sharks aren't there anymore, what is that going to do to the environment, the loss of that ecosystem role? And we're also interested in what fishermen think the ecosystem role is, and what conservation activists think the ecosystem role is, and what scientists
Very interesting.
think that the ecosystem role is.
And then we have a lot of questions about just how you became interested in sharks and what your schooling looked like up until this part to be able to have this cool job of getting to do shark research.
Sure. I've been interested in sharks as long as my family can remember. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so pretty far from the ocean, but we had an aquarium that had a shark tank, and I used to go hang out there. And I read books, and I watched all the documentaries I could find, and I just got really interested in sharks. And I got an undergraduate degree at Duke University in biology with a concentration in marine science. And then I got a master's degree at the College of Charleston in marine biology, and now I'm working on my PhD in environmental science and
Very
policy.
interesting, and I know that you have been very interested and vocal about sharks, and people are asking, are there any websites or papers that maybe you really like, or to recommend to people if they want to learn more about different species of sharks that they can look at and go to?
About different species of sharks, just learning facts about them, the IUCN Red List website is very good. A website called Archive, ARKIVE, like Noah's Ark, has some pretty pictures and some basic facts about them. If you want to learn more about shark research and conservation type things, follow me on social media. I share stuff every day.
Yeah, and we follow you on social media, so we definitely see some of those great things. We have to wrap up in just a second, but we got a couple more questions about great white sharks and sort of how deep they can go, and what are some of the waters like that great whites are found in. We know that's a popular one.
Sure. Great whites, I don't know exactly, but a lot of the larger sharks can go deeper than 1,000 feet, sometimes several thousand feet.
Very interesting.
And also return to the surface within a day. They're found a lot of places. They're more typically found in colder water. Off California, you get them a lot. Off Mexico, off the southern tip of South Africa, off the southern tip of Australia. Those are places where you're very likely to see them. But we caught one in Key Largo, so they move into warm water. They are big animals. They can swim many thousands of miles. If there's ocean there, there's a chance.
And I know I like to look every once in a while on O Search's Shark Tracker, just because they have some great whites, I believe, tagged, so you can kind of see some of their migratory patterns there.
Yes. We have a similar website option, but we don't have any tagged great whites. But on sharktagging.com, you can track our tiger sharks and hammerhead sharks and bull sharks using Google Earth software and see where they go and where they've been. You can also adopt your own great white shark, and some people do this as a class project. You get to name it, and you get to come out in the boat with us when we tag it, and you get to track it on Google Earth.
That's very cool. That's a really great opportunity for classrooms in the Miami area. And two last questions before we head off today. The last one of them is, have you ever been bit by a shark?
No, I've been bitten at a lot. I have never been bitten. I was once hospitalized briefly, but it was because of a fishing hook and not.
So the fishing hook is probably a little bit more dangerous than sharks to humans from a greater extent.
Yes. More people have been hurt by fishing hooks in the course of shark research than hurt by
Definitely.
sharks.
And the last question that I think a lot of people want to know is, what is your favorite species of shark?
The sandbar shark. Sometimes at aquariums they're called brown sharks. They were what I studied for my master's research. I worked with baby sandbar sharks.
Awesome.
My favorite.
And then, can you repeat the website name to track and adopt a shark?
Sharktagging.com. Yep, sharktagging, SharkTagging.
Awesome. And we will follow up. David, I'll connect with you. We are going to follow up to all of our registered participants with an email, so we'll be sure to include some of those links in there so that classrooms can explore these further. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an awesome presentation. I know that sharks are a really popular topic, so thank you, and thank you to everyone joining us. We hope to see you again later today on a later webinar, and everyone have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.
Thanks, Allie. Thanks for listening, everybody.